When I walked out of that conference room with the evidence folder in my hands, every eye in the hallway tracked my determined stride. No one expected what happened next. Our CEO, the untouchable Jonathan Reed, actually chased after me through the cold marble corridor, begging me not to leave. What transforms a devoted employee into someone willing to detonate a corporate earthquake? Follow me through this journey of calculated revenge that began with humiliation and ended with vindication. My name is Rachel Myers, and at 35, I had built what I thought was an unshakable foundation at Orion Edge Solutions. As a brand strategy specialist at one of the fastest-growing telecommunications companies in the country, I'd spent 7 years cultivating relationships, pioneering campaigns, and turning skeptical clients into devoted partners. My corner office on the 14th floor wasn't just a workspace, it was a testament to countless late nights, bold pitches, and the kind of creative thinking that had helped Orion Edge expand from a regional player to a global contender. The morning sun streaming through my office windows used to energize me. I'd arrive early, coffee in hand, ready to tackle whatever challenges the day might bring. My desk was always organized, chaos, color-coded folders for each major account, sticky notes with breakthrough ideas scattered across my monitor, and a small succulent named Fernando that somehow thrived despite my sporadic watering schedule. Orion Edge prided itself on innovation. Our CEO, Jonathan Reed, would often parade visiting investors through our open-plan workspace, gesturing proudly at the collaborative pods where teams huddled over the latest projects. "We don't just connect people through technology," he'd say, his silver hair gleaming under the modern lighting. "We connect ideas, cultures, possibilities." I believed in that vision. Hell, I'd helped craft the messaging. My inner circle at Orion Edge was small but solid. Linda Grant from HR had become more than just a colleague. She was my lunch companion, my voice of reason when office politics got messy. With her sharp wit and encyclopedic knowledge of employment law, Linda had guided me through more than one tricky situation. Then there was Amelia Foster from sales, a force of nature who could sell ice to Eskimos and somehow made it look effortless. We'd bonded over our shared love of true crime podcasts and terrible reality TV. And Trevor Blake from IT Quiet. Brilliant Trevor, who could fix any tech disaster and who'd helped me recover a crucial presentation after a system crash just hours before a major client meeting. The four of us had weathered Orion Edge's growing pains together. We'd survived the merger with Technovault, the layoffs during the economic downturn, and the chaotic restructuring that followed. We were, as Amelia liked to joke, corporate survivors. But even survivors can be caught off guard. When Marcus Hartley, our longtime marketing director, announced his retirement, the news rippled through the department like a stone dropped in still water. Marcus had been my mentor, the one who'd recognized my potential and pushed me to think bigger, bolder. His departure meant opportunity at least. That's what I thought as I polished my internal application for his position. I'd earned it. The numbers spoke for themselves. Client retention up 34% on my accounts, 3 industry awards for our rebranding campaign, and personal relationships with C-suite executives at our biggest clients. My colleagues assumed the promotion was merely a formality. "About time you got that corner office on the executive floor," Trevor had said, already planning how he'd optimize my new computer setup. The email came on a Tuesday. I remember because I was wearing my lucky navy blazer, the one I'd worn to every major presentation. The subject line was innocuous enough. Marketing Department Leadership Announcement. My hands were steady as I clicked open, certain I was about to read my own name. "We are pleased to announce that Edward Sullivan will be joining Orion Edge Solutions as our new marketing director, effective immediately." Edward Sullivan. I had to read it 3 times before the words sank in. Not an internal promotion, not recognition for years of dedication. Instead, they'd brought in someone from outside, someone from our direct competitor, Nexus Communications, where he'd supposedly revolutionized their market approach. The official announcement meeting was scheduled for that afternoon. I sat in the conference room, my usual spot by the window, watching as my colleagues filed in with confused expressions. Linda caught my eye and mouthed, "You okay?" I nodded, though my jaw was clenched so tight it ached. And then he walked in. Edward Sullivan entered the conference room like he owned it, And in a way, I suppose he did now. He was younger than I'd expected, maybe early 40s, with the kind of aggressive confidence that filled a room before he even spoke. His handshake was too firm, his smile too wide, and his eyes swept over our team with the calculating coldness of a predator sizing up prey. "I'm thrilled to be joining the Orion Edge family," he announced, his voice carrying that particular brand of corporate enthusiasm that never quite reaches the eyes. "I've heard incredible things about this team's potential. Potential, not achievements, not track record, potential. As if we were unformed clay waiting for his masterful hands to shape us." The first few weeks were a masterclass in psychological warfare. Though I didn't recognize it at the time, Edward scheduled get-to-know-you meetings with each team member. Sessions that felt more like interrogations than conversations. When my turn came, he kept me waiting 45 minutes past our scheduled time, then acted surprised when his assistant finally called me in. "Rachel." He pronounced my name like he was tasting something unfamiliar. "Marcus left some big shoes to fill. Tell me, what would you say is your greatest weakness in your current role?" I'd been through enough interviews to recognize a trap question, but this felt different. This was my workplace, my territory, or at least it had been. "I sometimes take on too much," I said carefully. "I have strong relationships with our key accounts, and they often request me specifically for their projects." His smile tightened. "Ah, yes, the personal touch, very old school. At Nexus, we found that clients respond better to team-based approaches, less dependency on individuals." The pattern emerged slowly, like frost creeping across a window. In team meetings, Edward would ask for my input, then interrupt halfway through my response to build on my ideas, which invariably meant dismantling them piece by piece. He'd assign me to present strategies I'd developed, only to step in mid-presentation to clarify points that needed no clarification. "Let me help you out here, Rachel," became his favorite phrase, always delivered with that patronizing smile. Help that felt more like sabotage. The Morrison Industries campaign was when things escalated. I'd nurtured that relationship for 3 years, turning a skeptical startup into one of our flagship accounts. The CEO, Patricia Morrison, trusted me implicitly. We were set to present our Q3 strategy, a presentation I'd spent 2 weeks perfecting. The morning of the meeting, Edward appeared at my desk. "Small change of plans. I'll be leading the Morrison presentation. You'll still attend, of course, for support. But Patricia expects Orion Edge to deliver results. That's what we'll give her." He picked up my presentation folder, flipping through it like it was a restaurant menu. "Some good ideas here. I'll polish them up a bit." Polish them up. By the time we sat in Morrison Industries' boardroom, my carefully crafted strategy had been butchered beyond recognition. Edward had replaced my data-driven approach with flashy graphics and empty buzzwords. I watched Patricia's face grow increasingly skeptical as he steamrolled through slides that promised everything and guaranteed nothing. "Rachel," Patricia finally interrupted, looking past Edward directly at me, "what's your take on the social media integration?" Before I could respond, Edward cut in. "Rachel's been primarily focused on traditional channels. The digital strategy is something we're bringing her up to speed on." The lie was so blatant, so dismissive, that I actually laughed a short, shocked sound that echoed in the boardroom. Patricia's eyebrows rose. She knew I'd been advocating for increased digital integration since day one. After the meeting, which ended with Patricia requesting to think things over, instead of her usual immediate approval, Edward cornered me by the elevators. "That laugh was unprofessional," he said, his friendly mask slipping. "You need to remember we're a team here. Your little performance made us both look bad." My performance, the words came out sharper than intended. "You presented fiction as strategy and undermined 3 years of relationship building in 40 minutes. His smile returned, but his eyes remained cold. "Careful, Rachel. That sounds dangerously close to insubordination. We wouldn't want HR to get the wrong impression about your ability to adapt to new leadership." The threat was subtle but clear, and it was just the beginning. The weeks that followed the Morrison Industries debacle became a calculated campaign of professional destruction. Edward's tactics grew more sophisticated, more insidious. He'd request reports with impossible deadlines, then publicly criticize their rushed quality in department meetings. He'd schedule me for simultaneous client calls, forcing me to choose which relationship to damage. But his masterpiece of manipulation was the quarterly revenue report. I'd submitted my numbers on Tuesday clean, accurate, backed by invoices and contracts. By Thursday's board presentation, those same numbers had mysteriously morphed. My highest performing account showed a 15% drop. A contract renewal I'd secured was listed as pending. 3 new clients I'd onboarded were credited to team effort, with Edward's name prominently featured. "These numbers don't match my records," I said during the presentation, my voice steady despite the rage building in my chest. Edward's expression was pure concern. "Rachel, I know transitions can be difficult. If you're having trouble with our new reporting system, I'm happy to provide additional training." The gaslighting was breathtaking. Several board members exchanged glances not of suspicion toward Edward, but of pity toward me, the struggling employee who couldn't adapt to new leadership. Sleep became elusive. I'd lie awake at 3 a.m., replaying conversations, wondering if I was imagining the malice. Was I being too sensitive? Was this just Edward's management style? But then I'd remember the smirk when he announced I'd be transitioning off the Henderson account, my biggest success story, to focus on professional development. The isolation was perhaps the cruelest part. Colleagues who once sought my advice now avoided eye contact in the hallway. Team lunches happened without invitations extended my way. Even the security guard who used to chat about his daughter's college applications now offered only brief nods. "It's like I'm radioactive," I told Linda over coffee in the parking garage, the only place we could talk freely. "Everyone's terrified of being seen as my ally." Linda stirred her latte thoughtfully. "They're scared. Edward's made it clear that anyone who challenges him gets the Rachel treatment." "The Rachel treatment," I repeated bitterly. "Is that what they're calling it?" "That's what he calls it, in management meetings." She hesitated, then pulled out her phone. "I shouldn't show you this, but you need to know what you're dealing with." The email thread she showed me was from Edward to the senior leadership team. My name appeared repeatedly, always in contexts of performance concerns and resistance to collaborative approaches. He was building a paper trail, crafting a narrative where I was the problem. But the final line made my blood run cold. "We may need to explore alternatives if REM continues to struggle with adaptation." R.M. Rachel Myers, reduced to initials, as if I was already being erased. "He's setting me up for termination," I said quietly. Linda nodded. "Or constructive dismissal. Make your life so miserable you quit, and he doesn't have to pay severance." That night, I sat in my home office, surrounded by 7 years of achievements awards, thank you notes from clients, photos from company celebrations where I'd been recognized as top performer. All of it felt like artifacts from another life. My phone buzzed. Amelia. "Heard about Henderson. This is bullshit. Drinks tomorrow." Then Trevor. "Edward asked for access to your client files. Told him system was down. Buy you some time." Small acts of rebellion from people who still believed in me. It wasn't much, but it was enough to shift something inside me. I opened my laptop and created a new folder, Insurance. If Edward wanted to play games, maybe it was time I learned the rules. I started documenting everything, every altered report, every interrupted presentation, every misplaced file, screenshots, emails, meeting recordings. Oregon was a one-party consent state, making my phone's recording app perfectly legal. The folder grew daily, a digital testament to Edward's campaign of destruction. 3 months into his reign, I discovered I wasn't his first victim. An anonymous email appeared in my personal inbox. "Check LinkedIn for his former colleagues at Nexus. Notice a pattern." I spent hours combing through profiles. The pattern was obvious once I looked a trail of women who'd left Nexus during Edward's tenure, all from his department, all with gaps in their employment history suggesting departures that weren't entirely voluntary. "Jesus," Trevor whispered when I showed him my findings during a technical support visit to my office. "This guy's a serial predator, corporate version." "The question is," I said, closing my laptop as footsteps approached, "what do I do about it?" The turning point came through an unexpected alliance. Linda called me late one evening, her voice hushed and urgent. Can you meet me at the Starbucks on 5th? Not the one near office? Too risky. I found her in the corner booth, nervously shredding a napkin. I've been doing some digging, she began without preamble. Edward's HR file from Nexus. I have a contact there who owed me a favor. She slid a manila envelope across the table. Inside were 3 formal complaints, all filed by women, all alleging workplace harassment and hostile environment, all mysteriously resolved with mutual separation agreements and NDAs. This is a pattern, Linda said. But here's the kicker: he left Nexus one step ahead of a formal investigation. They were building a case when he suddenly announced his exciting new opportunity at Orion Edge. Did Jonathan know? I asked, though I suspected the answer. The background check was selective. Edward has connections. People who vouched for him, glossed over the rough edges. She met my eyes. But Rachel, there's more. Amelia found something. The next day, Amelia cornered me in the supply closet, literally the only place without cameras. Remember the Morrison Industries presentation, the one Edward butchered? I nodded, the memory still fresh and painful. Patricia Morrison called me directly. She wants to move forward with the original proposal, your proposal, but she wants you to handle it, not Edward. Amelia pulled out her phone, showing me an email. Look at Edward's response when I forwarded her request. The email was professional on the surface but revealed everything underneath. Redirect Morrison to the new team structure. RM is no longer authorized for direct client contact without supervision. He's literally blocking you from your own accounts, Amelia said. But I've been forwarding Patricia your direct email, off the record. The web of support was growing. Trevor had been quietly maintaining backups of every file Edward had accidentally deleted or modified. He'd even recovered emails Edward thought were permanently erased emails, where he discussed his plans to clean house and remove obstacles. The man's an idiot about technology, Trevor explained during one of our clandestine meetings. Doesn't realize that deleting something from his inbox doesn't remove it from the server logs. I've got everything, his real performance numbers at Nexus. The complaints he thought were buried. Even his communications with that buddy in procurement about inflating vendor costs. We were building a case, but I needed more. The smoking gun came from an unexpected source, Edward himself. He'd grown overconfident, believing he'd successfully isolated me, during a particularly brutal performance review session, where he criticized everything from my presentation style to my inability to embrace change. He made a mistake. He left his laptop open when he stepped out to take a call. I had 30 seconds, maybe a minute. My hands moved without conscious thought. Phone out, photos snapped of the open windows. His email to Jonathan, suggesting my retirement package, a draft press release announcing my departure for personal reasons, and most damning, a spreadsheet tracking the women he'd targeted at previous companies, with notes on their departure strategies. I was on his list, of course. Status, in progress, expecting resolution within 60 days. That night, I compiled everything into a comprehensive file: emails, recordings, witness statements from former colleagues, financial irregularities, the discrimination complaints. It was devastating in its thoroughness, a portrait of a predator who'd perfected the art of corporate destruction. But I needed one more thing, the trigger event. Something so public, so undeniable, that it couldn't be swept under the corporate carpet. Edward, in his arrogance, was about to hand it to me on a silver platter. The quarterly stakeholder meeting was scheduled for the following week. Major clients, board members, potential investors, everyone who mattered would be in that room. Edward had already sent out the agenda. I was scheduled to present on process improvements, a token gesture to show I was still part of the team. What he didn't know was that Patricia Morrison had specifically requested my attendance, threatening to pull her entire account if I wasn't there. He couldn't refuse without revealing his campaign against me. I spent the weekend preparing 2 presentations, the one Edward expected safe, bland, forgettable, and the one I might actually give, depending on how far he pushed. Linda, Amelia, and Trevor knew what I was planning. You sure about this? Linda asked during our final strategy session. Once you go nuclear, there's no taking it back. I thought about the sleepless nights, the anxiety attacks in the parking garage, the way my hands shook whenever I saw Edward's name in my inbox, I thought about the women who came before me, silenced by NDAs and shame. "I'm sure," I said. "It ends next week, one way or another." The morning of the quarterly stakeholder meeting arrived with deceptive calm. I dressed carefully, my sharpest black suit, the one that made me feel like armor. In my briefcase, 2 presentations waited alongside a leather folder containing printed copies of every piece of evidence. The weight of it felt significant, like carrying a loaded weapon. The Jefferson Conference Center bustled with Orion Edge's most important players. Board members mingled with major clients over coffee and pastries. I spotted Patricia Morrison near the windows, her silver hair gleaming in the morning light. She caught my eye and nodded a silent show of support. Edward was in his element, working the room with practiced charm. He'd dressed to impress in a $3,000 suit that screamed new money. When he saw me, his smile sharpened. "Rachel, ready for your presentation. Remember, keep it brief. We have a packed agenda." "Of course," I replied, matching his false warmth. "Wouldn't want to waste anyone's time." The meeting began promptly at 9. Jonathan Reed commanded the room from the head of the massive conference table, flanked by board members and C-suite executives. I sat halfway down, my folder closed in front of me, watching Edward perform his opening act. He was good, I had to admit. Smooth delivery, compelling visuals, strategic use of humor to keep the room engaged. His quarterly numbers looked impressive until you knew which ones were fabricated, which achievements were stolen, which problems were buried. "Now," Edward announced, glancing at his agenda with theatrical precision, "Rachel Myers will share some insights on our process improvements." The dismissive wave of his hand as he introduced me like I was an afterthought, a box to check, made my decision for me. I stood slowly, leaving my prepared presentation in my bag. Instead, I picked up the leather folder. "Thank you, Edward." My voice carried clearly through the room. "I'd actually like to address something more substantial than process improvements." His expression flickered annoyance, then concern as he noticed the folder. "Rachel, let's stick to the agenda." "The agenda," I interrupted, opening the folder, "should probably include discussing why our department has lost 3 major clients in the past quarter, clients whose departures were hidden from this board." The room temperature seemed to drop. Jonathan leaned forward. "What are you talking about?" "She's obviously confused," Edward interjected, half rising from his seat. "Rachel's been struggling with—" "With what? Edward?" I pulled out the first document. "With watching you falsify revenue reports, with discovering you've been inflating vendor costs through your procurement contact, or with learning about the 3 harassment complaints from your time at Nexus." The silence was deafening. Edward's face had gone from red to white. "This is inappropriate. These are baseless accusations." "Baseless." I distributed copies of the evidence with calm efficiency. Page 3 shows the original revenue reports versus the versions you presented. Page 7 documents the Henderson account revenues you credited to yourself after removing me from the team. Page 12. Well, that's particularly interesting. It's your spreadsheet tracking the women you've targeted for removal, including estimated departure dates. Board members were flipping through pages, expressions shifting from skepticism to alarm. One of them, Margaret Chen, the longest-serving board member, looked up sharply. "This spreadsheet is real." Screenshots taken from his laptop, timestamp visible. He listed my expected resolution as 60 days. Today is day 53. Edward stood abruptly. "This is a violation of privacy corporate espionage, Jonathan. This woman is clearly unstable." "Unstable," I laughed, the sound cutting through his bluster. "Is that what you called Sarah Chen at Nexus, Maria Rodriguez at TechCore, Jennifer Williams at your first company? All women who left under mysterious circumstances after working under you." Patricia Morrison spoke from her seat among the stakeholders. "I'd like to hear more about why my communications with Rachel have been blocked. Why was I told she was no longer authorized for direct client contact? And I'd like to know," added Robert Kim from the board, "why these vendor costs are 30% higher than market rate." The pile of evidence on the table seemed to grow heavier with each question. Edward's allies, the few he'd cultivated, were distancing themselves physically, leaning away as if his toxicity might be contagious. "This is a witch hunt," Edward declared, but his voice had lost its commanding tone. Rachel's trying to deflect from her own performance issues. My performance issues. I pulled out my final document. This is an email thread between you and Jonathan, discussing my retirement package and draft press release about my departure for personal reasons, written 2 weeks ago, before any performance review. Jonathan's face had turned ashen. He was seeing it now, not just Edward's corruption, but his own complicity in bringing this poison into our company. I think, Margaret said quietly, her voice carrying absolute authority, we need to clear the room, board members and senior leadership only. Edward, Rachel, you both stay. The exodus of clients and stakeholders felt like a tide receding, leaving Edward and me exposed on the beach of corporate judgment. The boardroom doors closed with a decisive click. I remained standing. My evidence spread across the table like a prosecutor's case. Edward had collapsed back into his chair, his carefully constructed facade crumbling. This is insane, he muttered, but the fight had drained from his voice. Jonathan, you know me. We discussed the need for fresh leadership. We discussed improving department performance. Jonathan cut him off, his CEO mask finally cracking. Not this? He gestured at the evidence with disgust. Margaret Chen methodically reviewed each document, her reading glasses perched precisely on her nose. The other board members, Robert Kim, Susan Wallace, and David Torres, examined their copies with growing alarm. The silence stretched, broken only by the rustle of paper and Edward's increasingly rapid breathing. Ms. Myers. Margaret finally spoke. This evidence is comprehensive, but I need to understand something. Why now? Why this forum? I met her gaze directly. Because every proper channel was blocked. HR reports disappeared. Meetings were canceled. Emails were deleted. Edward created a system where silence was the only option unless I was willing to accept a public forum where nothing could be buried. She's lying, Edward burst out. This is all fabricated. Is Patricia Morrison lying? Robert Kim interjected. Because I just received a text from her. She's threatening to pull her entire account if we don't address this immediately. Says she has emails proving you blocked her communications with Rachel. Edward's mouth opened and closed like a landed fish. Susan Wallace, who'd been quietly studying the financial documents, looked up. These vendor costs, if accurate, constitute fraud. We're talking about potential criminal charges, not just termination. I can explain those, Edward said quickly. Market fluctuations, premium services. Services provided by your college roommate's company. I pulled out another paper. The same roommate who vacationed with you in Cabo last month. Paid for by which company expense account? I wonder. The final nail came from David Torres, who'd been on his phone throughout the discussion. I just spoke with Nexus's current HR director. She confirms 3 sealed complaints against Edward Sullivan. She also mentioned they were relieved when he left, saved them from a messy lawsuit. Jonathan's head was in his hands. How did we miss this? You didn't miss it, I said quietly. You chose not to see it. The warning signs were there. But Edward came with impressive numbers and powerful recommendations. It was easier to believe his version of reality than dig deeper. Enough, Margaret stood, her small frame radiating authority. Mr. Sullivan, you're suspended immediately pending a full investigation. Security will escort you from the building. Your access to all systems is revoked as of this moment. Edward shot to his feet. You can't do this. I have a contract. Which includes a morality clause and provisions for termination due to fraud, Susan Wallace noted. I suggest you contact your lawyer. Edward turned to Jonathan, desperate. Jonathan, please, we had a plan. The department needed restructuring. Get out. Jonathan's voice was ice. Before I call security myself. Edward looked at me then, and for a moment, the mask completely slipped. The hatred in his eyes was pure, undiluted. You've destroyed everything. No, I replied calmly. You did that yourself. I just refused to be another casualty. He stormed toward the door, yanking it open, but I wasn't done. Not quite. Edward, I called out. He turned, hope flickering that I might offer some reprieve. Your spreadsheet. You marked my departure as expecting resolution within 60 days. You were 7 days short. The door slammed behind him with enough force to rattle the windows. The board members exchanged glances. Margaret cleared her throat. Ms. Myers, what you've done today took considerable courage, but it also put this company at risk. You could have— What? I interrupted, my professionalism finally cracking. Quietly submitted a complaint to HR that would disappear, accepted a payoff to leave silently like his other victims, watched him destroy more careers while protecting the company's reputation. Rachel. Jonathan finally looked at me, and I saw something I'd never seen before: shame. I owe you an apology. We failed you. I failed you. I don't want apologies, I said, gathering my evidence back into the folder. I want change, real change, not just removing Edward, but examining how he was allowed to operate. How many others are suffering in silence because speaking up seems impossible? What are you suggesting? Robert asked. A full audit of our management practices, anonymous reporting systems that actually work, exit interviews with everyone who's left in the past year, especially women, and training that addresses subtle discrimination, not just obvious harassment. Margaret nodded slowly. Those are reasonable demands. What else? I picked up my folder, holding it against my chest like armor. I want to think about whether I have a future here, because right now, I'm not sure I can trust this company to have my back. Rachel, please, Jonathan started. I'll be taking the rest of the week off, I announced, moving toward the door. You have my personal email if you need to reach me. I paused at the threshold, looking back at the people who controlled Orion Edge's future. Oh, and you'll want to check the Morrison Industries contract, and Henderson, and probably Skyline Tech. Edward's been making promises he can't keep. You'll need someone who actually knows those accounts to clean up his mess. I walked out, leaving them to contemplate the full scope of the disaster they'd enabled. My heels clicked against the marble floor as I headed for the elevator, each step feeling lighter than the last. The hallway outside the boardroom stretched before me like a runway. Through the glass walls, I could see clusters of employees pretending to work while stealing glances at the drama unfolding. News traveled fast in corporate America, and the sight of Edward Sullivan being escorted out by security had already become the stuff of instant legend. I maintained my composure until the elevator doors began to close. Then, just as they were about to shut completely, a hand shot through the gap. The doors bounced open to reveal Jonathan Reed, CEO of Orion Edge Solutions, looking more disheveled than I'd ever seen him. Rachel, wait, please. Behind him, I could see other board members emerging from the conference room. Margaret was on her phone, likely calling legal. The others huddled in urgent conversation, but Jonathan had abandoned them all to chase after me. I need to get my things, I said evenly, stepping out of the elevator. Unless security is escorting me out too. God, no. That's not— He ran a hand through his silver hair, destroying his usually perfect styling. Can we talk? Just 5 minutes, please. The please caught me off guard. Jonathan Reed didn't beg. He commanded, directed, decided, yet here he was, following me through the hallways of his own company like a supplicant. We passed the marketing department, heads turned in synchronized motion, tracking our progress. I saw Amelia at her desk, eyes wide. Trevor stood by the printer, forgotten papers in his hand. Linda emerged from HR, took one look at Jonathan's face, and gave me the slightest nod of approval. Not here, I said quietly. Too many eyes. My office, he suggested. No, I wouldn't give him the psychological advantage of his own territory. The atrium, public enough to keep you honest, private enough to talk. The atrium was Orion Edge's architectural crown jewel, a soaring glass space filled with living walls and the soft murmur of water features. We found a bench near the koi pond, far enough from foot traffic to avoid eavesdroppers. Jonathan sat heavily, looking every one of his 58 years. I don't know where to start. Try the beginning, when you decided Edward Sullivan was worth more than the women he destroys. He flinched. That's not I didn't know about the complaints. The background check showed what you wanted to see, a rising star from a competitor, someone who could shake things up, someone who played golf at the same club, who spoke the same language of aggressive expansion and market dominance. You're right, the admission seemed to physically pain him. I was so focused on poaching talent from Nexus that I ignored the warning signs. When Marcus retired, I wanted a splash higher. something that would make investors take notice. Well, they're taking notice now. A group of employees walked past, slowing obviously to stare. Jonathan seemed to shrink under their scrutiny. The king discovering his throne was made of sand. "What you did in there," he said finally. "It was nuclear. You burned everything down." "No, Jonathan, I lit a match." Edward had already soaked everything in gasoline. "The board is in crisis mode. There's talk of a full investigation, potential legal action, our stock price." "Is that supposed to make me feel guilty?" I laughed, short and sharp. "Your stock price." While Edward was destroying careers, fabricating numbers, and defrauding the company. "That's not what I meant." He turned to face me fully. "Rachel, you're one of the best strategic minds I've ever worked with. Your client relationships are impeccable. What I built here was systematically destroyed while you looked the other way, while HR buried complaints, while my colleagues were too terrified to speak up. Tell me how to fix this." The desperation in his voice was real. For the first time in 7 years, I was seeing Jonathan Reed without his CEO armor, just a man who'd built an empire and suddenly realized the foundation was rotten. "You can't fix it with a meeting or a memo," I said. "This is cultural, systemic. Edward was a symptom, not the disease." "Then help me cure the disease. Come back not to your old role. Something bigger. VP of Strategic Initiatives. You'd report directly to me. Full autonomy to implement the changes you outlined." "You're trying to buy me." "I'm trying to save this company and make amends." He pulled out his phone, showing me an email. "Patricia Morrison isn't the only one threatening to leave. We've got 3 other major accounts demanding answers. They all want to know if you're staying." The koi circled in their pond, orange and white flashes beneath the surface. I watched them, thinking of the past 7 years, the late nights, the victories, the relationships I'd built, all of it tainted now by Edward's poison. "I need time," I said finally. "Real time, not a day or two. I need to think about whether I can trust this company again, whether I want to." "How much time?" 2 weeks, full pay, and during that time, you clean house, anyone who enabled Edward, anyone who ignored complaints, anyone who participated in the culture of silence they go, that could be half the leadership team. Then you have a bigger problem than you thought." Jonathan stood slowly, looking older than when he'd sat down. "Rachel, for what it's worth, I'm sorry. Not just corporate sorry, personally sorry. I failed in my duty to protect my employees, to protect you." I stood as well, smoothing my skirt. "Apologies are just words. Jonathan, I'll be watching to see your actions." He extended his hand, and after a moment, I shook it. His grip was firm but somehow uncertain, like a man reaching for stability in an earthquake. 2 weeks, he confirmed. "And Rachel, that evidence folder, how many copies exist?" I smiled then, the first genuine smile in months. "Enough. Consider it insurance, for all the women who might need protection in the future." I left the building that day with my head held high, carrying only my personal items in a banker's box, the typical image of corporate departure, but with one crucial difference. I wasn't fired. I wasn't forced out. I had chosen to walk away on my own terms, leaving behind a corporate earthquake that would reshape Orion Edge Solutions for years to come. The 2 weeks that followed were revelatory. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from colleagues, clients, and even competitors who'd heard about the boardroom showdown. Patricia Morrison called personally to offer me a position at Morrison Industries. 3 other companies reached out with VP-level opportunities. The woman Edward had marked for destruction was suddenly the hottest free agent in the industry. But I needed those 2 weeks for myself. I really slept for the first time in months. I had lunch with Linda, Amelia, and Trevor at our old spot, where they filled me in on the aftermath. Edward's termination had triggered a domino effect. The procurement director he'd been colluding with was fired. 2 senior managers who'd participated in his campaigns against female employees were demoted. HR underwent a complete restructuring. It's like watching a building get renovated while people are still working inside. Linda told me. Messy, chaotic, but necessary. On day 13, Jonathan called. "The board has approved every change you suggested. Anonymous reporting system, comprehensive management training, Exit interview audit, all of it. Margaret is personally overseeing the implementation. And the leadership team. 4 resignations, 2 terminations, and 1 early retirement. We're rebuilding from scratch. On the morning of day 14, I made my decision. But first, I had one more meeting. Edward had been trying to contact me through various channels, all blocked except one. I agreed to meet him at a coffee shop downtown, curious to see what remained of the man who'd tried to destroy me. He looked diminished, sitting in the corner booth. The expensive suit was gone, replaced by khakis and a polo shirt that made him look oddly vulnerable. When he saw me, something flickered in his eyes, not hatred anymore, just defeat. "Why did you agree to see me?" he asked without preamble. "Closure," I said simply, "and curiosity. What does a man like you say when the game is over?" "I was going to threaten you," he admitted. "Lawsuit for defamation, corporate espionage, whatever might stick. My lawyer talked me out of it, said your evidence was too solid." I've lost everything. My career, my reputation, my connections. Nexus is cooperating with the investigation. There might be criminal charges. I sipped my coffee, feeling nothing, no satisfaction, no pity, just emptiness where my anger used to be. "You lost everything the moment you decided your ambition mattered more than the people you destroyed. Is that what you think? That it was about ambition?" He laughed bitterly. "It was about survival. Do you know how hard it is for someone like me to climb the corporate ladder? No Ivy League degree, no family connections. I had to fight for every promotion. So did I. So did every woman you targeted. The difference is, we didn't destroy others to advance ourselves." He stared into his empty cup. "I never thought of it as destroying, just clearing the path." "That's the problem, Edward. You never thought of us as people at all, just obstacles." I stood to leave, but his voice stopped me. "Are you going back?" "Yes, VP of Strategic Initiatives, full autonomy to prevent another you from happening." "You won," he said quietly. "No," I corrected him. "I survived. There's a difference." I walked out, leaving him with his empty cup and empty future. The sun was shining as I made my way back to Orion Edge Solutions. The building looked different somehow, less like a fortress, more like a place of possibility. Security had a new badge waiting for me. "Welcome back, Ms. Myers," the guard said with a genuine smile. "Heard you're shaking things up around here." "Just getting started," I replied. The elevator ride to the executive floor felt like ascending to a new chapter. My new office with a view of the city and a door that locked from the inside was already set up. On my desk was a bottle of champagne from Linda, Amelia, and Trevor, with a note, "To the woman who refused to be silenced." As I settled into my chair, my phone buzzed with a text from Margaret. "Board meeting tomorrow. First agenda item, your comprehensive reform proposal. No interruptions guaranteed." I smiled, opening my laptop to begin drafting the future of Orion Edge Solutions. A future where Edward Sullivans would be spotted, stopped, and shown the door before they could poison the well. A future where talent was nurtured, not destroyed. A future where no one would have to choose between their dignity and their career. The sun set over the city as I worked, painting the sky in shades of gold and amber. From my window, I could see people leaving the building, heading home to their lives and families. Tomorrow, they'd return to a different company, one where speaking truth to power wasn't career suicide, but an act of courage that would be protected and valued. I'd walked out in dignity, I'd returned in triumph, and now, the real work could begin. Thank you for listening to my story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment below and let's connect. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. Have you ever faced a similar situation in your workplace? How did you handle it? Your experiences matter, and sharing them helps us all grow stronger together.